G'day everybody, how's it going this week? Well, I'm going back to my old mic setup. Since last week I had some issues with the internal audio in the ears things. They're kind of cool, it makes me sound really loud. I just have to project my voice now since I'm using my external mic again, which is just, your standard Yeti, your like Yeti thing. um, But I was noticing it was okay when it started doing that whole mono to solo or stereo thing, but basically it was like it started to really do some scratching things, and I'm like, well, maybe I ought to just kind of forget this for now, as it's sort of like ruining the thing. That's why last week's episode took me so long, because there was like this whole issue with audio quality, and I had to like skip certain parts, and you probably heard a little bit of it because I had to try and cut some parts out dealing with that. But anyways, technical issues aside, we're back this week on our old audio setup. I think it's a good solid setup, and I think it works for what it needs to do. So I'm just going to continue doing it that way until I figure out what's going on with that. Maybe read up on it and do some testing. But until then, let's get on to what we're actually going to be talking about this week. And what we're going to be talking about this week is a really quick story about kind of a funny little situation that happened in basically a city in Alberta, Canada. So let's premise this by let's talking about Western Canadian fur groups. One of the larger fur cons in Western Canada, that's pretty well known, is the convention called Vancouver. You see what we did there? You'll have to forgive us. We do that all the time. If there's an F and an R in the name of something, we'll probably stick a fur in there. Just to distinguish it as a fur gathering in that particular region. So Vancouver is a convention that takes place in the British Columbia province city of Vancouver, which is just north of Washington State, across the border. So one of the biggest stories that probably came out of that particular convention, that is very well known as a very positive story, happened to be somewhat of a sort of a coincidental incident that occurred in 2016. That was when Syrian refugees were flown into Canada and were taken in by Canada, and happened to be being taken into the same hotel in which furries were having their convention in the year 2016. Now, the convention very much was like, just, keep your distance, don't bother the kids too much, and don't bother them too much, they'll be on your side, you'll be on your side. They were kind of like, very much a cautionary, like, don't get too involved in it, just like let them be, and they'll let you be. But what ended up happening in the grand scheme of things is that there was like some very positive interactions between some of those young Syrian refugees and the furries, and they like really enjoyed themselves, and there was multiple pictures that could be found of these two groups that have really nothing in common, sort of coming together and finding like enjoyment out of a situation where these kids were running from something a war zone, which is quite abhorrent. So at the end of the day, that was like one of the biggest positive news stories that has had probably a very good lasting impact on what furry, the joy that furries can bring to other people from dealing with extraneous circumstances. That being said, the issue of taking in refugees by a country, by a nation, is seen as a gesture of goodwill, is seen as a good way to bring in new people, and people who would love to get a new start on life and to work hard in order to, contribute to a society that isn't, on the rocks and isn't like dealing with such political turmoil that the very survival of their citizens are at stake. The issue comes into the fact that as immigration is never easy, and not every immigrant, unfortunately, gets a warm, fuzzy welcome like this. Many of them just arrive and then have to deal with this new home. And unfortunately, there are individuals in those new homes that have somewhat of a resentment towards newcomers. It's very much part of a human schism where, newcomers are looked down upon or seen with adversity. And immigration is always difficult in that sense, in that you're kind of there and people see you as lesser than them, the people who have been there the whole time. They treat you like novices or outsiders and outcasts. And Canada is no exception to that. America is sort of, well known for that kind of schism with, historically dealing with immigration, with Irish Americans and Italian Americans and other things like that. Interestingly, like some of the things that we did to try to appease immigrants from the past have come up to be seen as something that is very harmful to, other people in the present, sort of like Columbus Day was used to try to appease the harsh treatment that Italian Americans were given when they were immigrating into the country. That was on that, what's it called? Adam Ruins Everything talked about that. And obviously Columbus Day now is seen as like a very why do we even have this thing? And Columbus was a very terrible person and not really a role model whatsoever. But that's a whole other can of worms. But at the end of the day, that's always been an issue with human society, is that the newcomers are always treated as lessers because they're the noobs, right? They're the newbies, the noobs, NOOBs. We have so many words for rookie. We've got rookie, greenhorn, noob. There's just so many words that we use in order to describe somebody who's less experienced or is somebody new to the scene. And so it's sort of it's sort of seen as sort of a hazing ritual sort of a thing. And sadly, though, other people just take it way, way too far and take it to the point where it's there's adversity and then there's just being a jerk. And unfortunately, that's found in a lot of different. That sort of xenophobia can be seen in many cultures, including Canada. So this issue comes around with this group called what they call the Wolves of Odin, as a sort of right-wing nationalist group in Canada that goes by many names apparently. They also call themselves the Soldiers of Odin. They call themselves the 3%ers. They call themselves. There's a lot of different names that they have, and it's I can kind of see why that sort of philosophy lends itself to them mocking. It's like that sort of philosophy sort of mocks people with identity. It's you're using your identity to protect yourself. But it's the people can't even, freaking choose a name and stick with it. But the Wolves of Odin is a very important name here because an individual in a town of Edmonton, which is in Alberta, which is about 11 hours northeast of where we originally were talking about Vancouver. And Vancouver is a very expensive place to live. So it's world renowned for having a very high cost of living, particularly with real estate, because real estate's been kind of bubbling up to a ridiculous degree in Vancouver recently. It's basically world known for that. So if you have somebody immigrating into the country, they're probably not going to be able to settle down in Vancouver, so they're probably going to have to move out east. But looking at it, it's kind of interesting because I was looking up when I was looking up about this whole social issue about what's going on with the immigration of people from Muslim regions. There's a lot of mosques in Canada, a lot more than there is in an average United States city. Because when I was googling mosques in these areas, there's quite a bit of them. When you go south of the border into America, there's not so many. So, like, I believe that they're, Canadians welcoming influx of individuals from those war-torn regions, and, they're establishing religious organizations within the area. Unfortunately, there has been backlash from these Wolves of Odin sort of, communities that are becoming paramilitary, and there's Vice articles in the description below talking about these particular organizations. So, a person from Edmonton, who very much seems like a meme troll sort of individual, apparently like works at some sort of tavern in that, and he is known for making other sort of meme-ish sort of things, and he's taken advantage of as you can see here, a very sort of inappropriate joke. He made gummies out of we'll say he took Bad Dragon's ideas of politically shaped objects and put them into gummy form, and put a big bag of, instead of like gummy bears, think of gummy phally, right? Like just a big old bag of gummy phally, and he's like, you give this to a person when you want to tell them to eat a bag of dicks, okay? So it's a very, very kind of immature kind of humor, but it sells because, like, people, when you want to craft it, you want to tell this person to eat a bag of it, then you just give them a bag of them, right? And they can chew on that, right? So apparently the guy makes $150,000 a year, selling these little bags of gummy phally to send to your frenemies and telling them to eat a bag of it. So, and here I thought, here I was told Canadians were nice people. I mean, come on. But apparently he took his joke. He wanted to send these two kind of bags to the Wolves of Odin, who have been harassing people who are, practicing their religion of Islam within their mosques, and making conspiracy theories that the people in the mosques are planning something evil, and rallying up their group and trying to, and what they'll do what's called stakeouts. They'll send one of their guys to those mosques to kind of hang out around the entryway and be sort of a jerk. So he was getting tired of these organizations doing that. So what his response was creating a website for the Wolves of Odin, utilizing furries in a very suggestive manner. So he created this website called the Wolf's Den, using the Wolves of Odin website. Basically, they basically bought up a domain for Canada for Wolves of Odin and created this website out of it. More details in the description below. So this individual is obviously a big fan of internet meme culture, as you can kind of tell by the names that he gave his little pseudo wolf partners here on his website's main page. Chocolate Rain. Now that's an old meme, sir. And then what was the other one here? I remember the other one was pretty old too. Oh, 2 pups, 1 cup. I don't have to go over what that one is. That one's more inappropriate than the bag of gummy phally. But so it's very memey. So it's like a fake sort of dating site for wolf characters, fursonas, and other sorts of depravity, in order to sort of do it in his own way to sort of mock the paramilitary group that's sort of festering in the Canadian political culture. The website he has, like, if you go further down to the bottom of the page, it kind of goes over. So it sort of does send links to education about those sort of groups, and the sort of implications of those particular kind of xenophobic, paranoia sort of groups that believe in these sort of conspiracies, and the negative impacts they have on the community and whatnot. So, I mean, he's using his powers for good. Interestingly, in the Vice article, he sort of feels sort of regret for using furries in this way, which good on you for doing that. I guess it's like, because furries have kind of received this as sort of a mixed bag. It's like, well, it's kind of fun to see, us being used in order to try to, embarrass a group that's making those Syrian refugees that we had hugged and welcomed into the Canadian country, that some of us who had attended that convention had stepped in and made the new individuals from that region of the world feel welcome. Now, let it be said that not everyone from that region of the world practices that particular religion of Muslim, but obviously an individual from Wolves of Odin or Soldiers of Odin isn't going to be able to distinguish. They're going to go by more how a person looks than what their actual philosophical and beliefs are. They'll see things make assessments more at skin deep levels, more likely. So the individuals, regardless of their religion makeups when they're taken into the country, are probably going to have to deal with individuals who are sort of xenophobic and having to deal with that sort of issue. So to kind of see us 2 to 3 years later, after we had welcomed those refugees in Vancouver, to see a person in Edmonton who's not really related to the fandom use the fandom's image in order to try and sort of create a sort of mocking tone towards the people who are xenophobic, actually sort of like doubles down on the whole, like, hey, look, furries are standing up for you guys. Interestingly, like the person who originally made the website was like, man, I kind of feel bad for using furries in this way. I don't mean any harm, but this is kind of being silly about it. And I think furries are mostly understanding about that. His words about, like, at the end going, it's like, my hope is that these right-wing extremist groups don't come after me, or the furries don't come after me. I gotta tell you though, dude, to the man who did this, I don't think you have anything to worry about with the furries. There's only one person that I know who's done murdery things, who is a furry and who has committed murder, and that was over a love spat in Southern California. So that's a whole other can of worms, and it was within the furry fandom. It wasn't like a furry murdering a non-furry. So, like, furries aren't that murdery, is what I'm trying to say. The other group that you're kind of mocking here, they kind of got some firearms, and they kind of look like I don't know if they're posturing or not, but they certainly have the capacity and seem to have the intent that they could be certainly more murdery than furries are. So the odds that a furry would do anything to you is bar none. But I wish you the best, and hopefully those other individuals leave you alone. I don't think that they obviously weren't using the domain anyway, so it's kind of their fault, I suppose. But that kind of does make me feel hopeful in a way, because it's like organizations like that aren't obviously buying up the web domains they need to buy up to do proper marketing, which is a good thing, because we don't need those guys learning how to properly market. Don't worry, you're in good company. I don't know how to properly market. So, anyways, so the gentleman here, certainly, if I ever find myself up in Edmonton, if I ever find myself up in the depths of Edmonton, I'll certainly buy the gentleman a drink here. I probably won't, though. I don't know if I have any reason to go that far into Canada. I'd probably end up in Eastern Canada before I ended up in Western Canada. But you never know. The world's a strange place. But anyways, that was all there was today. So if you want to read more about this particular event, or read more details about this particular story, there's some links in the descriptions below that discuss these groups and discuss the individuals and discuss the area. And the They'll discuss the whole Vancouver issue or situation and the whole issue, and I think that's about it. That's what we're going to cover this week. So thank you very much for watching this week. If you like what you see, kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. How do you feel about having the furries image used in order to sort of to have a little pokesy funds at the expense of xenophobic organizations such as the Wolves of Odin? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think that person should have done something else? If so, what would you have done? I don't know. Like, give some ideas and thoughts. And thank you very much for watching again. I'm going to get the hop out of here, and I will see you guys next week.